Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are cracking open something absolutely fascinating. We're going to deconstruct the exact architectural blueprint for creating a truly high-end, emotional visual narrative. The source material we're digging into is a highly detailed creative brief, a master set of instructions called Neon Nocturne. Look, whether you're directing a live-action crew, storyboarding an animation, or prompting a state-of-the-art AI video generator, seeing how a visual prompt is constructed with this level of precision is just incredibly eye-opening. We're going to unpack the exact parameters needed to generate a flawless, cinematic masterpiece, right here, together.
Okay, let's just jump right into our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with directing Neon Nocturne, then we'll map out the 8-scene emotional arc. After that, we'll dive into mastering camera and light, define the cinematic style, and finish up with the ultimate guardrails.
All right, part 1, directing Neon Nocturne. Before we even think about rolling a camera or rendering a single pixel, we've got to establish the ground rules of the world we're building.
And the magic number here is 4. Our source dictates a highly specific 4-minute runtime for this ultra-cinematic journey. It's essentially structured like a romantic music video. And, 4 minutes is literally that perfect industry standard to tell a complete emotional story. But it's not just about how long it is. The instructions strictly mandate 4K resolution, high dynamic range, and a 24 frames per second frame rate. And that 24 frames per second detail, that is absolutely crucial. It's the universal standard for motion pictures. It gives the movement that classic slight motion blur our brains instantly associate with high-end cinema, completely avoiding that weird, hyper-smooth reality TV vibe. Our protagonist is this lonely guy wandering rain-soaked neon streets, and he absolutely has to be captured in the highest possible fidelity.
Now this is a real game changer. Just throwing the phrase anamorphic lens into the mix instantly catapults the whole visual generation into this premium, Hollywood-level cinematic space. If you're not familiar, anamorphic lenses physically squeeze a wider image onto the camera sensor. And when that image is stretched back out, boom, you get that classic letterboxed widescreen look. But honestly, the best part is the beautiful optical imperfections it introduces. Out-of-focus backgrounds stretch out into these gorgeous ovals, and any bright light, like our futuristic neon signs, stretches into those iconic, long, horizontal lens flares. 2 simple words, and you've practically guaranteed the final image feels incredibly expensive and deeply atmospheric.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 8-scene emotional arc. Because let's be real, a beautiful image means nothing without a compelling story driving it. Let's see how Neon Nocturne pulls this off.
This timeline beautifully lays out the narrative progression. It's a literal emotional U-shape. We start up high with a gorgeous sunset establishing shot, getting the lay of the land. But by scene 4, we've dropped down to street level, into a gritty neon rainstorm, and the emotional stakes are really ramping up. Then we hit scene 7, which is rock bottom, the climax of the heartbreak. We're talking dramatic slow motion, heavy rain mixing with tears, the whole shebang. Finally, scene 8 gives us that deep visual exhale. The storm breaks, a golden sunrise hits, and a crane shot sweeps us back up into the sky. So the secret sauce here is this intense visual duality. We have the cold, wet, total isolation of the present violently clashing against these incredibly warm, sun-drenched memories of a lost love. The source material specifically weaves flashbacks into scenes 3 and 5. By bouncing back and forth between the present, which is all blue hour, wet pavement, and dark leather jackets, and the past, which is golden hour sunlight, warm breezes, and happy moments, it creates a massive sense of loss. And it does it without a single line of dialogue. The environment itself is carrying the entire emotional weight of the story.
Up next is Section 3, Mastering Camera and Light. To actually make the audience feel those contrasting emotions, we have to look closely at the technical tools being used.
Notice how brilliantly this brief pairs dynamic camera moves with super atmospheric lighting techniques. We aren't just locking a camera on a tripod here. We're using Steadicam follow shots to walk right over our protagonist's shoulder through the puddles. We're using cinematic handheld movement to inject this raw, slight human tremor into the frame during those emotional breakdown scenes. Now imagine pairing that movement with volumetric fog. That isn't just a flat gray background, it's thick 3D smoke that physically catches the neon light. Add in some God rays slicing through the dark, and you've created an environment that feels unbelievably thick and immersive. This is one of my favorite storytelling mechanics. Using an 85mm lens with a super shallow depth of field physically blurs the world away. It traps our guy in his own internal thoughts because the busy city around him literally melts into a wash of color. Photographers call that bokeh. But then, the brief strategically calls for a 35mm cinematic lens for the wider shots.
That snaps us aggressively back to reality, showing us exactly how small and completely alone he is inside this massive sprawling skyline.
Okay, part 4, defining the cinematic style. Let's dig into the precise choices that make sure this looks like a $1 million production and not just another generic digital render.
The prompt absolutely insists on hyperrealism. When you're making digital art, the default is so often this overly smooth, almost plastic perfection. But this brief fights tooth and nail against that. It demands natural skin texture. We're talking pores, slight imperfections, the way wet hair genuinely clumps together. That completely tricks your brain into thinking it's a real person. Plus, specifying luxury fashion ensures the wardrobe behaves right. A slick black leather jacket is going to perfectly catch those wet, neon highlights, right? And tossing in film grain texture, that is the ultimate organic magic. It adds this tiny, dancing noise that just makes the whole image feel totally alive.
I absolutely love this detail. Explicitly requesting Kodak Vision 3 color science guarantees the final output has a true masterpiece aesthetic. It is such a powerful command. Kodak Vision 3 is not just some trendy app filter. It's the actual physical film stock used by heavyweights like Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino. By feeding that exact phrase into the prompt, you're telling the system to perfectly replicate the chemical color response of actual film. You get deep, inky nighttime blacks, perfectly rolled off street lamp highlights, and flawless human skin tones. It's basically a cheat code for instant cinematic prestige.
Finally, Section 5, the ultimate guardrails. To keep this hyper-realistic illusion from shattering, we have to talk about negative prompts. Because telling the system what you don't want is just as critical as telling it what you do want.
These rules are lifesavers. Because seriously, nothing kills the vibe of a heartbreaking romantic montage quite like a flickering guy walking down the street with 6 fingers on one hand. Digital generations notoriously struggle with hands inconsistent backgrounds. By actively slapping down these guardrails, banning flickering, rejecting bad anatomy, forbidding distorted faces, the director is building an invisible fence around their vision. They're forcing the engine to prioritize structural integrity above all else. And knocking out oversaturated colors, make sure those neon lights stay moody and grounded, rather than blowing up into something totally cartoonish.
This is a strict zero-tolerance policy. Think about the stakes here. The entire emotional payload of Neon Nocturne relies on eye contact, subtle facial expressions, and tears mixing with rain. If the resolution suddenly drops, or you get weird digital artifacts popping up on the guy's face right during the climax, the spell is completely broken. The viewer stops feeling the heartbreak and starts staring at the glitch. This list is the absolute floor of acceptable quality, the creators demanding a pristine canvas from the very first frame to the last.
So, we've unpacked the whole thing. You now understand the actual anatomy of the cinematic blueprint. We've seen how picking the right lens, mapping an emotional arc from rain to sunrise, dialing in the camera moves, and setting ironclad guardrails all combine to build an incredibly rich world. Neon Nocturne isn't just a sad walk in the rain. It is a masterclass in intentional visual design. So with this level of precision and detail now in your toolkit, what kind of world are you going to bring to life next? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.